Okay, so basically, early this year, we discussed with Deepti, so we being a group in the lead program, which is called Impact by Lead, where we work on impact-related topics. And one thing that we discussed with Deepti and the LISA team was that if we want us as a group to have impact, why not work jointly with the founders of the LISA team so that we can discuss together about impact of their projects and maybe help them to maximize their impact. So this workshop is the first one that we are doing together. And the idea is to first, there will be two parts. The first part is to present you, at a high level, what is impact, what it means, why it is important. And the second part will be more like a workshop. And the idea would be to split the group into two breakout rooms, each breakout rooms with two members of the Impact by Lead team. And we will use some of the templates and the framework that we'll present to you to your project. Okay, so that it will be normally you will go out of this session, which should be roughly 1 hour and a half, with better understanding of what is impact and the first kind of round of how to apply it for your project. Okay, so this is the team that prepared this workshop. So my name is Julian, French, based in France, and I work for Symbio, which is a company developing hydrogen fuel cells for transport industry. So I let my colleagues introduce themselves. Satyo-san, you want to start?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, I'm Satya. I'm from the Ventures cohort. Currently, I work in Deloitte Consulting, growth strategy and innovation. And basically, I've been in the banking industry for over 20 more years. And currently, I look at the growth strategy related to ASEAN regions for global companies. So really looking forward to work together. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Form. I'm a Wayfarer, the cohort that started in fall 2017. I'm based out of Singapore, been living here a little over 8 years. I work at PayPal. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Asia Pacific region. And whatever time that Satya leaves out of Impact by Lead and then Julian with this workshop, I spend on helping secure our products and services in the region. Really excited to be here and meet you.
I am based in Washington, D.C., and I work with a development finance institution focused on Latin America. It's called IDB Invest. I'm currently leading a transformation program, but I'm passionate about impact, and that's what we do at IDB Invest. We invest in projects for the developmental impact of Latin America. So I think it's great to be here with you and give you an introduction on that concept, the impact.
Okay, so now that we've presented roughly the content and the team, any first feedback about the content, if it is well aligned with your expectations, idea, or any comments before we actually get started? If everything's good, you can just say it's okay. Right, thanks, Ami. Okay, so Juanita, I'll let you start and I'll move the slides.
Yes, so here are some basics about the sustainability. Sustainability is it's about being able to meet your need without compromising the needs of future generation. And when you apply this to business, it's also about building a viable business that doesn't have a negative impact on planet, people, and the economy. It's very important. I like this representation of the sustainability concept with this people, planet, people, and economy as a pyramid, because if you want things to be working well for the economy, you need to have the planet in a good condition so that people can thrive. And then if people and the planet can thrive, the economy can thrive on the long term. So we can continue. And that's what and when you look at the lens, usually so far, companies have been focusing only profits. And in reality, if you want to have a positive impact and if you want to be sustainable, you have to look at the triple bottom line. You need to look at your impact on the planet, on the people, and also on the profits for, you know, the economy. So this is an important concept, the triple bottom line, the fact that you're looking at also at the positive social impact that you're taking, the positive environmental impact, and the positive financial return. Yes. I think we can move to the next slide. So when it comes to sustainability, it's been a long time. People have been trying to figure out how can we this goals so that we can achieve sustainability. And in 2015, the United Nations developed the concept of Sustainable Development Goals. It's an evolution because before there was the millennial goals, etc., etc. But I think these Sustainable Development Goals, because they were so graphic, and you can see the 17 goals on the right side of the slide, it's very easy to see you want, you know, what you are working towards. No poverty, zero hunger. Or you can look at, you know, the life below water, that's a goal 14. So that concept of sustainable development goals, it gives you a framework. It gives you an idea of, okay, I'm working towards these specific goals. And it also is very good when you talk with investors, because you can say, I'm sustainable, I'm working, my business is working towards this specific goal, and I have this specific impact. So they were adopted in 2015, and back then when they were created, it was considered that they would be requiring investment of about $30 trillion over the next decade. So it needs not only the government's efforts, philanthropy efforts, but also private investment efforts to reach these goals. So we can move on. One concept that I'd like to touch upon is circularity. You may have heard about circular economy. And what is it? I think it's the idea that when you're doing some business, you don't just make waste. You don't just make and dispose. You have to try to recirculate and reuse what was priorly considered as, you know, waste, something that cannot be revalorized, and you have to revalorize it so that eventually you reduce the waste, right? You reduce the impact on the planet, and if the waste is toxic, you reduce the impact on the people too. And the circularity, the concept of circularity, is important because it helps achieve what people call sustainable consumption. And the United Nations Environmental Program, the UNEP, they have pointed out that circularity is a solution that can help tackle several SDG goals at the same time. So when you look towards doing a more circular economy, you one way to rule them all. It helps, you know, design out waste and pollution, you keep products and material in use, and you regenerate natural systems. So I mentioned before that, you know, working towards sustainability is a market, a business opportunity. Who is the CEO of BlackRock and who did the 2022 letter to the CEOs. He said that the next 1,000 unicorns will be sustainable, scalable innovators. So you need to think that helping toward the disruption towards sustainability, the disruption towards circularity and circular economy, that's where you want to be, you know, if you want to thrive during the next decade or so. Just a couple of numbers that were mentioned. There was an estimation by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development that it was necessary to spend $2.5 trillion per year to cover the SDG gap. So the idea is that you need that additional investment so that we can reach the sustainability goals down the road by 2030. And I mentioned 30 trillion before, but right now I think the idea is that the market opportunity is $12 trillion by 2030.
Yeah, so this if I understand well, this is like the the private business opportunity, and the rest is what is covered by government and philanthropy, right?
Yes, exactly.
This was the high-level introduction. So, I mean, up to this point, do you have any questions? You know, we didn't want to spend too much time on some of this basic concept, but you might have, you know, we have time. So, if you want to ask questions, you can. Because then next step we'll go more into the tools and the toolkits about to achieve these goals. All good? All right. Thanks, Ami. All right. So now some of the toolkits, some of the tools that we put in the toolkit that could be considered, and you know, we will kind of review and use together in the second part of this workshop. So the first one is impact financing. So you know how to get started, get the investment to start it. The impact weighted value and the impact measurement is basically how to measure and to report impact that you can have as a company. Circular value chain. So Juanita will go into more details about this. And finally, when you look at, you know, in the same way that when you look at your project, you look at the profit model and the business model canvas, there are some things we could do with an impact lens on, and we'll consider the shared value, amplification value, and the impact business model canvas. So on the impact investing in financing, at a very high level, what is important is, you know, as Juanita mentioned, historically, investment was based on kind of the balance of risk and return, right? So from the 70s, we started to measure risk in a more like a systematic way. And because we could measure and estimate risk, we could then put in regard risk and return. And this is where we could start to have, you know, very safe investment, but with low return, and very high risk investment with high return, like typically venture capitalism. But now, you know, with impact kind of revolution, as Sir Ronald Cohen puts it, we need to look at three, you know, companies can look at the optimization of three things: is the risk, return, and also the impact. And this is what investors now are more and more looking at. So first, if we look at traditional investors like pension funds, asset management firms, you know, Juanita mentioned BlackRock, you know, their kind of thinking is that the impact measurement is actually a measure of a risk. If you have high negative impact, there is quite a high probability that in the future, you will be targeted by either customer or government to basically claim back your negative impact. So for example, if you are in a company doing high profit, but also a big environmental impact, negative impact like pollution, etc., there is a high risk that in the future, the government will put tax on your pollution, tax on emissions, or that they will request you to close down. So having a positive impact is seen as basically reducing the risk comparing to a negative impact. The second aspect is that from their customers of the pension funds and the asset management firms, there is, with the new generations, especially a strong demand for ESG-oriented investments. So not only generating money for money, but generating money, making profit while not having negative impact on the planet, and if possible, have positive impact, which is even better. And this is where we'll go to like a virtuous circle in the next slide. Now, outside of this kind of traditional aspect, there are other specific ways to get investments. So the bonds are one of them. So green bonds are basically traditional bonds, but that will fund environmental projects. So it's still a two-party contract, but focus on environmental project. And so, for example, in Leeds, we have, sorry, Sacho-san, I forgot the name of our friend.
Grisha?
Grisha, yeah. So Grisha, who has worked on establishing, I think it was a $1 billion green bonds on the cacao industry, you know, which is a significant amount of money. What we see more and more now, also what is called social impact bonds or development impact bonds. So there are different names. I think these names are especially for the UK. I think in the US, it is called with a different name, I think related to output investment. I will confirm after. But here the idea, it's a three-party contract, a three-party deal with basically the investor. So the people that will put the money in and are looking to get a return on their investment, the company that get the investment, and then a third player, which will be the outcome payer. So for example, it could be a government, or it could be a non-profit organization that say, if this company reached this specific impact, I will pay you back your investment plus benefits. Okay, so this is quite interesting because the outcome payer only pay if the positive impact is reached, and the investor, in average, some project will fail, some project will succeed, but in average they still make money. So that it's a business where they can make money, and all the companies get investments to basically develop and scale up, as opposed to pure kind of philanthropy funding. So we see more and more of these projects, and usually driven by NGOs or governments that see this actually as good government management, because basically the government, which is often the outcome payer, will only pay for success, which is, and the investment risk is taken by private investors. Then you have some companies, focusing on like a seed stage, or to support entrepreneurs that will also focus on impact. Here I give you some example that I found in the Sir Ronald Cohen book on impact. So they are all, I think, US based, Ashoka, Equine Green, and Endeavor. And finally, on the VC side as well, now we see more and more venture capitalist companies just specifically focusing on impact. So that means when you present and pitch the project to them, what will be important for them is actually to estimate the risk, return, but also impact, and they will communicate on this. Okay, is it clear? So I propose to continue on this measurement with Juanita. Sorry, yeah, there is a question.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I quite like the idea of social impact bonds, and I did not know about it, to be honest. That's one thing I did not know about. But you said it's UK, which also means in this, like the France, Switzerland, Germany region also there's something like that? Or
Yeah, there is, just the name is different. I can send you the names. I think in the US there is, or is like PUF or some like project with outcome funding or something like this.
Yeah, but the concept of social impact bonds and development impact bonds, it's very generic in the sense that you will have that in Europe, you will have that in the US, you will have that in Latin America, right? And I think what is different between these bonds and traditional bonds is that there are these impact criteria that need to be met, right? So they are defined beforehand so that you can, during the process, right? There is a monitoring process during the life of the project, and you have to verify whether or not you have this impact, so that the investor can get the money, right? So I think this is, or more money. So that's what is different compared to other systems.
And one follow-up question on that, and maybe for the founders. So when you get even the seed stage investment or something, and there are quite a few, like Abhi, I know, is working on recycling fashion or AI for vehicle, which are actually dedicated towards social impact in some way. Even at that point in time, could you apply for this kind of, I don't know, mechanisms? Or is it more like you're like a proper company, only you can apply for it?
So for the I think the bonds, it's usually the bonds are used for more mature companies, but I'm pretty sure that there are schemes of portfolio to finance portfolio of projects, right? So that's where I can look into it. But if you have a social impact bond, it usually could be on a larger scale normally. And if you want to finance, startups, there's probably schemes of, of a portfolio of projects that could benefit from this big financing that has been raised. So what typically works better for startups is that the banks that I know, they create funds like the Blue Fund or some, and with these funds, which are impact oriented, with the same kind of criteria, right, that you have for impact measurement over the life of the project, then you get the money. So it's usually for impact for the startups, it's more with the funds and grants.
Yes, and on my side, what I've seen as well is, as Juanita said, is so usually the investor, so now you have like investor company that focus on setting up this social impact or bonds or development impact bonds, because basically usually they kind of discuss with the outcome payer. So the outcome payer say, so for example, in the UK, let's say there was one project, one example I remember was to reduce the, how do you say, when you have people go in prison, they go out and they do something bad and they go back to prison again. So in France, so you do it again, right? So they wanted to reduce the percentage of this so that prison is actually kind of enabling people to go out of the criminal cycle. And so there was this high level goal from the government, and then the investor discussed with them, okay, what could be the measurement for this? And then how much value, because then it has a value for the government. So people not going back to jail means they actually win money, because they don't go to jail. The government does not have to pay for the jail, and people do create value in the society. So the government say, okay, I can dedicate this amount and I expect this return. And then the investor will basically look for company and companies. And in this example, it was pretty small ones, like 10 people, 5, 10 people companies, but not just one, several companies working on the same topic. Right, and overall they built like a bonds with several companies, could be small companies, to reach this goal over 3-5 years, like reduction of this recidive by, for example, 20% on the specific target. And in this case, they actually succeeded, and it was a win-win-win deal, because government win money because what they paid back is actually lower than the benefit they got by having not people going back to prison. The investor won because they got some return on their investments, and the companies also won because they got investment to scale up. Okay, so usually as a company, you will look for who are these kind of investor companies that are building this kind of project, and basically propose you need to be known to enter this kind of.
I think Amy has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, is this public information to see like a list of social impact bonds and their investors that are tied to it? Or following, is there some type of fiduciary responsibility from the investor side that they need to disclose to whoever they invest in that they have this separate engagement, right? I'm just wondering, like, okay, if we get funding potentially by an investor, and I know that they actually have a hedge with this, government piece, I think that would be interesting for me to know as a founder.
So for bonds in general, and I've been working in debt, private sector debt, but bonds are all different beasts. And from a legal perspective, there are more disclosures required when it comes to bonds, because theoretically, what's different between bonds and private debt is that bonds are usually available and open to the public, or at least to a large number of people who have access to, who can invest in the bonds, right? So there are usually a set of disclosures and a lot of documentation about what is it that is expected, who are the investors, what is the return that is expected, what are the risks, and all of the things. So for this specific, if investors want to invest in that kind of format, there are a lot of legal documentation which goes a lot into detail. If you want to information about these bonds, so it will depend, right? Because some of them would have been public, but some of them would still be only disclosed to a certain range of investors, right? So once you're not part of these investors, you won't have all of the details, right? But normally before investing, when they open, there is a lot of information available. But it's very hard. What I've seen is that there are, ONGs who are actually trying to get some sort of registry of all of the bonds, or so that they can say, okay, we've got this amount of social bonds in that continent and in this continent, and what are the governments that use it more or less. And it's not that easy to get all of this information. So and it's even more difficult to get to know what are the criteria that they've been using when you're not part of the investing pool, right?
Yeah,
I hope
thank
I
you.
answered your question.
You did. I think it's very interesting because, you're right. Like I would not know if there was a private placement between the investor and the government, right? But as a founder, if I'm interested in speaking to that investor, that venture capital, it's invaluable information that I know that there's actually a separate benefit to the investor. Unless we're saying that outcome payer, which might be the government in this situation, would also pay something directly to the company itself. In this example being me, right? So then I would know. But if I don't know, it seems like there's quite a bit of value that I could lose if I am not aware of this. But I guess this is the nature of those private deals. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll have a look and maybe come back on this. Okay, so yeah, Juanita, continuing on the
yes.
reporting.
So impact weighted value. This is a new concept, which I think is still it's important to learn about. Sir Werner Cohen has been talking about the concept of impact weighted value, and there's a team at Harvard who is working on figuring out how can you quantify in your financial statement the actual impact that the planet and people. So if you go on the website of Harvard Impact Weighted Values, there are for several industries, for the oil industry, for the airline industries, and for other industries. They've already done the work, so you can see, what kind of adjustments they're doing. But basically, the idea is that first, I'm sure you've heard about ESG, environmental and social governance, right? And there's a lot, and very recently you probably heard that I think Tesla was kicked out of an ESG index, right, recently and there's been a lot of talk about it because they were saying, oh man, but my goodness, Tesla is like better than a lot of other companies which are in that index. What does it really make sense? So the concept of ESG, environmental and social governance, is a concept that has been used a lot by corporates to try and measure the risk that are related to the environment and social impact. But these ESG ratings that exist right now, they're solely trying to measure the risk for the company so that they can reduce their reputational risk, for instance, right? But they don't really measure whether the impact that they have is a positive impact or really negative impact. So it's a different concept. So this concept of impact weighted value, it links to the concept of the triple bottom line. It's trying to quantify, okay, the impact on social, the impact on the environment with dollar value, so that in the profit line that you have, the adjusted profit line, you can see what it is. So there is this example about the environmental damage from the operations of Exxon, BP, and Shell. So if you look at the EBITDA of all of these companies, you may think that Exxon and BP, they have kind of the same EBITDA. So you're saying, oh, they're all doing really great. But if you look at the environmental impact of Exxon, which is 34 billion, if you were to calculate an adjusted EBITDA, and if you were to discount this environmental impact from that EBITDA, ExxonMobil's EBITDA, adjusted EBITDA, would be negative. Compared to BP, where you see they have a 29 billion EBITDA, but only a 14 billion environmental impact, their adjusted EBITDA would be something like 15 billion, right? So it will be positive. So I think that is this concept that we need to be able to translate in dollar term the impact, and and so that people can visualize better this triple bottom line with this dollar quantification. So that's an initiative that is still working on. It's not a standard, but I think it's good to know that it exists, because if, when you go and talk to investors and you want to compare them, and they so sometimes they can tell you, well, you have a lot of costs, or you have, maybe your profit is not as big, etc. By doing this adjustment, you can compare it, what you do with competitors that do not, do what you do. You can actually show the positive impact that you have. So I think that's something interesting to know about. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Okay. So in terms of this impact, right, environmental impact, sometimes the impact will be for the future years to go, right? And it could come not at necessarily a fixed pace, right? You could have investment now, maybe 10 years later, you might have some really big impact, or you have investment now, you could have steady impact for the next 10 years, right? So that would all discount today at a different dollar amount, right? So I'm not very familiar with this. What is the IWA methodology? Can you quickly help gauge that? Just to get a sense of how, or is it just rather about the impact as of today?
So I'm not sure. I can look into it. I think I would assume that they take the NPV approach, right, to evaluate the impact today and some of the impact over the long term too. Of course, it's always hard to assess the long-term impact, but I would say that I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure that there must be some sort of factorization of, the today damage that that is really concrete, and what is, the future impact that you can expect, but which is not certain, right? So I think I'm pretty sure that's taken into account.
But I think this might be why, Juanita, this is not yet official, because you can feel it is really super complex. And because we don't know the impact it will have on companies if they start to report this. For example, Exxon might lose a lot compared to BP. I guess, it must be very, very tough to come to a standard accepted by most kind of accounting firms.
Yes, there are several companies who are working on trying to do something similar than this impact weighted value. But I think because this initiative is led by Harvard, I think this has a good potential of being a standard at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so forum now we go to impact measurement.
Yeah, Anjanette created a perfect segue for us to go a little bit deeper into the question that you were asking, is how does a business, small, medium, or large, kind of think about it in their strategy, right, in their planning. And one of the reasons, as Julian mentioned at the top of the talk, why we all have joined Impact by Lead after completing the course is to try and understand this and truly answer the question from a business strategy perspective. All of you are going to have to answer all of that. And that's why this is incredible in a sharing setup as to whether it should be security or convenience, whether it is experience or features, whether it is impact or profit. And what we want to do here is to introduce you as you start thinking about, when you create your marketplace, when you source your materials for your recycling and reusing of uniforms with incredible startup ideas, is how can you truly measure the success of your company? So there are, you heard about IWAI and incredible as the work that is going on, your companies most likely are not going to be using it anytime soon, right? Because those are not the kind of reports that you will be doing it. But what you can do here are leverage some of these frameworks that exist that allow you to measure the impact of the work that you are doing, both positive and negative, and we'll get into that, but communicate it to your investors, to your stakeholders, to your customers in a way that not only shows the actual numbers, the actual impact, but the values behind which, the passion that drives the startups that you all are creating. And that there is incredible amount of power, as much as powerful as your stories are, when you put some numbers behind them, when you show the entire life cycle from, again, raw materials into the end product, and then how many lives it touches, whether it is a product, whether it is, again, some kind of a service that happens, it's super helpful. So to do that, just like any kind of a business plan, these are the key steps. Is you have to obviously define what is the impact, which area you want to target, what are the targets, measure them and find a way to measure them. Make sure that there are ways in which you can communicate the story specifically for impact related audience, as well as an audience that cares about both the profits and the impact, and find ways in which that they can understand. And that's what these frameworks are. And these links, when you get the slides, have a wealth of information that you can look at. But what I want to do on the next couple of slides is just introduce you to some of the language that simplifies, that helps you to simplify how you can start communicating that. Jillian, if you could move it to the next slide. So these are, generally, like from a UNSDG perspective, from any kind of business that is trying to have the language, the taxonomy of IMM, impact measurement and management, in your overall business plan. These are the 5 dimensions that you want to consider. So what, who, how much, the contribution and risk. And as self-explanatory as they are, they do require a little bit more thought, because there is layers beneath them also that allow you to truly dig a little bit deeper and think about them a bit more purposefully. So what is what, right? I mean, what is the outcome? What is if you want to, like, on a very, very simple level, if you are going to align and leverage the UN SDG goals, it is which specific SDG goal that you want to target. So like, SDG number 5 is gender equality. And if your startup's working towards that, then you're going to say, my what for the startup is to work on SDG 5. So a lot of people in the impact industry, especially if you do get some kind of an investment from them, would understand. And then within SDG, then there are sub goals and sub metrics that you can then start reporting into. So what is incredibly important? Who, as you can imagine, is the audience that you are targeting. But the more granularly that you can define, I mean, it can be obviously individuals, and individuals with certain attributes, certain geographies, gender, age, type, socioeconomic background that they come from, or it could even be planet. If the who is the planet, and you are, whatever you are doing, again, picking the SDG goals that you've targeted, you're focused on trying to make an improvement on a particular area, then it needs to be shown who is it ultimately going to impact. Third, as incredibly important, is the measurement aspect, right? How much, and that's ultimately the definition. So once you understand what and who, the definition of impact is the difference that you've been able to create, either in reducing a negative impact or creating a positive impact. And that's why it's a really, you have to think about the coverage that you're going to go after, the scale that you're going to go after, the duration, like Anjum was talking about, that you're going to target, the depth of the impact that you want to try. And so ultimately, to what degree, for how long, exactly how will the measurement of the work that you're doing, that your company is doing, that your products are hoping to achieve, will kind of show up. Fourth dimension is contribution. So this is very, very important to understand and make sure that you kind of pay attention to, is ultimately what aspect, what percentage of the impact that has happened. Let's say a maternity clinic in Uganda receives the kind of, or you've created a maternity clinic, and after 5 years, you want to see what was the reduction in mortality among infants that were born out in that neighborhood area within 5 to 10 kilometers. Contribution talks to the very specific metric of what did your startup do, what did your clinic do in this aspect. Again, taking maybe Amy Pago's example, is the number of exchanges that happen, the matchings that happen. Ultimately, what aspect of the impact that has happened can be contributed to the work that you have done. And then the fifth dimension is risk. Again, incredibly important. Like anything on the profit and loss sheet, your balance sheet, your income statement, you have to also think about it in impact. If you're creating something, especially this is important when you're creating some kind of a tangible product, but also if you're introducing new policy, if you're pushing for purchasing new, again, insurance or anything else, what is the risk? What could go wrong? And how are you going to keep track on that? How are you going to monitor that to ensure that the ultimate impact, that you have the right checks and balances, so that the risk that could come, you could try to manage that a little bit better. Ideally mitigate it. If not, then transfer it. If not, then are you able to avoid it completely, especially, if it's about not providing your services in certain countries. It could be also about the types of materials that you use. So there will be a lot of decisions that you'd have to make over the span as you continue to grow on some unexpected things that can happen in your startup. And then to know what risks you are able to accept at to what extent and not what not is an important discussion you need to have with your co-founders and others. Lastly, I'll say, these are the 15 categories. Just a previous slide, sorry, Jillian. Within each of those 5 areas that allow you to start thinking about it, I would highly recommend that at this level, even picking like 1 or 2, no more than 2 in each category, unless you really have thought it through, would be more than enough for you to have a clear impact strategy of what your business wants to do, right? To have a discussion with a specific stakeholder, whether again, investor, customer, partner, anybody else, to talk about why what you are doing is impactful. In the workshop, we'll go through a little bit of it, but I think, again, on the next slide, there is a checklist that shows how you can go through and brainstorm a little bit. The example here is used again, the maternity clinics, a social enterprise created that clinic in South Africa, which once they measured, how did they talk about it, what specific metrics they used in each of these areas, the categories within the 5 dimensions of impact, and then, how they continue to communicate with their stakeholders over the years.
And for
Sure.
Yeah, and Faram, I wanted to build up on what you say in the first slide on impact measurement, and there were links to IRIS, for instance, and IRIS is a catalog of accepted KPIs. So if you go into IRIS, you can see, it can also help you, build what Faram was mentioning, right? Because there are some specialists in impact management and measurements which have already thought about for certain industry, for certain sectors, what are the key criteria that we need to look into. So that can also be a useful tool.
Yeah, thanks, Vanita. Let me see if any of the founders or anybody else have any question. If not, I'll just close at the asphalt example where, a startup out of France, I think somewhere in Europe, is using all of this very, very well to communicate that story of sourcing, of their supply chain, of ultimately what they are measuring, and then communicating it to their customers who not only understand what they are purchasing, how it's been made, but also what is that impact, both negative in terms of the CO2 emitted, water consumption, energy depletion, all of that, but also who all it has touched, how many, again, farmers it's helping, and so on and so forth. So they openly publish it on their website. So anytime anybody comes to purchase a shirt or a garment, they can look at it. So just an idea for you to think about, again, this to not just be something that you are doing to convince a very, very narrow set of audiences of why what you're doing is having an impact, but also your customers who truly care about impact as much as you do.
Thanks for so. Any question? Amy, yeah, Amy.
Yeah, can you speak to like maybe any guidance that startups can have in kind of thinking about how to frame their own business? Because I can see a lot of subjectivity with this, right? Like if you start a company that is already missioned on social impact, I think like you check some of these boxes already. But what if you just don't have the finances yet to make every sustainable decision, right? So then like how are you judged on that versus the social impact that you're creating? It seems like that weighting is not that clear to me. What is more important here? Or is it just you have the overall goal of sustainability, so you try to make the right decisions at the point that you can and you give and take there?
No, I mean, so it's a very good question. And by sustainability, if you're, once again, maybe pointing at environmental impact, then clearly, for somebody who is just starting out, they do need to figure out where the sources are, where they get the best rates for the raw materials that they want to procure and all of that. But there is the social aspect, right? I mean, the most important thing is the awareness. Do you understand, who are the people who create the raw materials? And maybe you don't do anything right now to change their lives because you are just a small startup that is going to purchase very, very small quantity of it. So the journey, I think, maybe starts with just that awareness and having some kind of an purposeful intention to say, these are the areas that I want to target, whether it is environmental, whether it is social, whether it is even just governance. I mean, one of the things, again, I work at PayPal, and one of the metrics that PayPal's chosen is on the governance side, where we would reduce the amount of fraud losses. Now, you could argue whether it is really going to have an impact as much to the individuals as it would to our company, because we cover all the losses for people that use PayPal to transact money. But at the end of the day, it does have some kind of an impact, right? To have the best fraud loss ratios in terms of who does it, who is on the receiving end of it. So I would say, you shouldn't worry too much about trying to fit ESG or sustainability into the business model. But what is important is to truly understand the business model in a way that tells you who are all the stakeholders whose lives it touches. And the next few slides actually will cover it, is how is value created through the startup that you are working on? How do you truly work on amplifying that value? And then once you understand everybody that it touches, then it becomes kind of a little bit, it'll start becoming more and more obvious or clear what are some of the areas that you want to target, whether on environment side, on social, or on the governance side. Hope
I think
that helps.
To add on this, we'll see Satcho-san will explain on value amplification, and a lot of the example that we see, actually the main target of the business is not one of the SDGs. It's more that to developing the business, so in a profitable way, what are all the byproducts, how to amplify impact, so that it's not it's not or you do SDG or kind of business and you have investment is an end. So you have investment because you have a profitable business model, and at the same time you maximize amplification by looking at all these stakeholder maps, and as a byproduct of your profitable business model, you actually target some SDGs.
Yeah, I think just to add, coming back to the previous, when I think Julian mentioned about is this three criteria of risk, return, and impact. So this impact criteria is currently added from the previous model of risk return. So that's sort of like a new additional criteria to think about, addition to when we think about the business model. So the amplification is a way, as mentioned, to what are the drivers that increase the value created to be shared? What are the increasing factor is something that we'll be able to explain that later on. Yes.
Abby, you have a
And
question? Sorry.
We have questions.
And sorry, I wanted to add up on that. I think the question was also, how do you choose, right? Because there are so many things that can be done. And I think you need to think about two things. First, are you going to have a specific business model that is more circular, so that it's are you really doing a transformation of your business model, or are you just trying to continue with what you had but mitigate the impact, right? So I think you need to think about that. You also need to think about going more with a more sustainable business model, how you can capture attract more investors to your business, and how can having a more sustainable business model, more sustainable product, how can that attract also more clients? I think you need to think about these two things. And you need to, and I think it's also about the 80-20, right? The Pareto rule. You need to think about, okay, what are the most impactful thing I need to focus on so that I can have an impact on attracting investors or attracting customers, right? You cannot do all at once. But what I will add is, and I know that for the clients from my development finance institution, when they come, they have their own narrative. They come and they tell, I am a good client for you because we are having an impact on this and this and this. But then at the development bank, we have our own impact measurement and management system, and we have certain criteria, and we have our own standards of KPIs that we want to monitor. So then, with the help of these investors or the financiers, you can also get a more granular list of things that you can monitor and to help you show in facts this narrative, right? So that's what I wanted to add.
Thanks. Abby, so do you have a question still?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Very interesting. So in my mind, I'm thinking this is very similar to all that happened with data protection. For those in Europe, GDPR and PESC rules a few years back, I think 5 years back. Very similar. Everyone was talking about it, and then we had to measure the impact. We need to have clear policies and so on. The question is, who will do it? Do we need to deploy like an external consultant who will parachute in, not at the startup stage? I'm saying, okay, when we're up and running, does that need to be done by someone external because do we have the skills, or how does it work? For example, GDPR, I'm comparing to that GDPR, then you have a data protection officer. Larger companies are supposed to employ or have like this person in-house, or you have a consultant who does the audit every year.
Yes, so consulting company actually, like for example, I work at Deloitte, and actually I started off from strategy business, but now I think half of my work is actually focused on sustainability. So consultants do that. Also in-house division of the company does it. Sometimes banks would also advise that has some divisions focused on sustainability. So I think at the initial stage, we'll have the third party to advise on that. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yes, I can confirm that. I work in a development bank, and basically what happens is that we have a team of experts, and I would call them impact experts, right? So whenever they review a project from a company, they will tell them, okay, these are the KPIs that you need to monitor and that you need to be able to monitor over the long time. So in that case, the bank tells you these are the KPIs, right? And then you have to have people, within your team that are capable to go and get this information, right? Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes, it's just about, okay, what is the average salary of your employees? So that we at the bank, once we get this information, we compare it to the average information that we have, right? Sometimes these are very simple metrics like, okay, let's say that you have renewable plants generating electricity. So basically they tell me how much electricity you're producing each year. So that's not extremely complicated for you to get, because you need to get that information so that you can charge this electricity and get the money, right? So some items some KPIs are easier to get by than others, but usually when you work with a development finance bank, they will come and tell you what they want you to measure to reflect the narrative that we were talking about, right? And you need to have people on your team so that you can collect that data over time.
Thank you.
Dipti, you have a question?
I have a comment to make, and you guys can agree or disagree with me, but I just want to bring that in here, and which was that all these startups that are with Lisa, at least at this point in time, everybody's extremely like in the idea MVP phase, where they're actually developing their products. They haven't really reached the stage when they're thinking about impact in the long term. And what I would personally think is also very important is to start thinking about these criteria at this point, and not to think about the consultants or not to think about who to be involved, etc. But more like the idea of this workshop is also to make you understand that these are the areas you should be thinking about, also from in terms of not just investors, but clients or your customers, right? So it's a way of starting to think about it, putting down on paper, where are the places you could actually make a positive impact or reduce negative impact. And eventually when you are at a stage of building a company, that's when you would need all those mechanisms. But at this point in time, I wouldn't worry about hiring a consultant. But that's my point of view, but definitely you guys know better than what I do. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why
and this is why
about...
Yeah, this is why we have some kind of framework and templates, later in this document that we can start together, and you can then continue, and we can exchange during the LISA program, as a first step. Yeah.
And that's why I think now it's more about thinking of this narrative. What is it you're going to talk about? Okay, and then are you going to say like asphalt that your operation are reducing the amount of water compared to the standards, that you're helping farmers? What is the story that you want to tell about that, the impact that you have? And then once you think about that story, you think about how is it going to be interesting for your customers and for the investors, right? Because and the investors, I'm talking about them because of course you need funding, but also because there are investors that will be interested in more and more in investing in companies that can show that they are sustainable, because there are new nomenclatures that especially in Europe, right, where they have to tell very clearly in what kind of company they have invested, and so that they can really show and demonstrate that they are having the impact. There is this concept of greenwashing or impact washing that worries a lot of investors. And basically, what is that? It is basically having companies saying, oh, we're great, we're having a positive impact, but in reality, they're not doing anything, right? So that's also another important thing. So now at this stage, think about the narrative. And then once you grow, you will see either with consultants, either with your lenders, they can help you, nail down these, the right KPIs to show that you really truly have the impact that you want.
Okay, so I realize that the discussion is very good and the time is flying. So we have now 20 minutes left. So I think it would be good still to keep a bit of time for the workshop aspects. We'll discuss a bit after how we'll manage this in like 15 minutes. But so let's, Sacho-san, do the shared value. I think we'll go very quickly or skip the example.
Okay. Yes,
And,
I guess, yes,
yeah.
I guess we'll go to the next page. Yes, the value implication is this, as our group and impact by lead, this is actually one of the things that we're throughout the discussion with the startups and the companies, we look at what is the value, what is the increasing element of the value that is created and shared. And that is actually sort of like our definition when we think about the impact. And these are the three companies actually The right one is the Grisha's Cacao Institute, but the three companies are something that we have found in common about this amplification factor. And it is the, for example, the end right, this company is providing the high value added skill set to the drivers. And this actually impacts the change in the mindset of the other truck drivers. The second one, the Angara, this is more of the clean energy companies, which actually changes also the mindset and also the philosophy for the whole industry. And not only this company, but as industry to think of the cleanness of this. So which creates a further increased value to the wider stakeholders. And so is the Sustainable Cacao Institute that increases the wider stakeholders, including employment and also the society that brings the further added value. And I'd like to look at this more in detail in the next page. Yes, so for the impact business model, this is something that we thought about more in detail. I think you all probably have looked at the business model canvas that you see on the bottom at the top green part. This is what we have as a business model canvas or narrative. And we added these two elements on that is shown on the orange side, is that when we think about the cost and the revenue, that is something that we look at as a starting point. But what are the other factors that actually creates a further value? Actually, we define this thing as a capital asset. And what do you mean by capital asset that is impacting? There's actually an element of the capital asset. This is actually something that is actually presented in the Stanford sustainability course as well. Stanford's capital asset framework that you define as a human capital, natural capital, manufacturing capital, and the knowledge, and also the social capital. So these are the capital. Are these actually increasing in proportionally? We also see some facts that sometimes if we focus too much on other things, that might actually bring down the human capital element or a mental element of the employees. So we need to be mindful of all these elements that is bringing up the initiative. I'm just briefly kind of introduce one of the Google's partnership with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which kind of shows some examples of how by partnership with this Ellen MacArthur Foundation that they create a new data center which enables a CO2 emission technology, and also drive the employees' initiatives to spend on the 20% focus on sustainability, which also led to the increase in the intellectual capital of this sustainability. And so that's one of the example that looks at the impact. So the virtuous circle is actually, I think you probably have looked at on the strategy leadership course, but we probably need to look at the narratives and what actually creates the further value. So yeah, I think those two are something that we have added to the business model canvas, which we can work on the workshop further. So I'll just yeah.
And finally, some word on the circular value chain.
Was on mute. Yes. So I talked about the circularity. We talked about the circular economy. So I like this graph because usually when you think about business, you think about the value chain. You think about what are the activities that you are doing that actually create value for your business and that lead to the profit. So when you want to become more sustainable, and when you have manufacturing, products, you need to think about how you can actually recirculate your product in profitable loops, so that you can reduce the waste and so that you can reduce also the need for raw materials, right? So these circular value chains, it shows in blue the traditional value chain, inbound logistics, operations, distribution channels, marketing and sales, and after sales. But then it adds the elements that enable you to create a loop to recirculate and make a profitable loop with, you know, the end of life products. So you have the rebound logistics, which is about how you process your returns, how you can reacquire items at the end of their life and incentivize people to give them back to you instead of throwing them away, managing the collection system of these products so that once you get these products, you can either reuse them, repair them. You do refurbishing like Apple is doing. They have a trading program where you give back your iPad and they will refurbish it and they then sell it at a discounted price to other people, right? So it gives them a shorter profitable loop, but it adds profits to them. Or you can remanufacture, which is about it's a little bit like refurbishing, but with a deeper deconstruction process. And then you also have the waste management where you have to think about, okay, how can I reduce waste by design? How can I reduce the toxicity of the waste that I produce? So this is, I think, important to keep in mind if you want to make your business and your products more sustainable. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, after that, we had the case study. So what I propose is that maybe you can look at it offline, but this is where, you know, in a couple of slides, we show what was for this case study, specifically the value creation, value amplification, and value sharing. What was the impact on two assets, you know, environmental and social, and some element of their kind of circular value chain. So how they manage reuse and repair, and how they manage secondary transformation, as an example of how we apply this. So for the workshop, I must say, you know, I'm open to a suggestion and discussion. The idea initially was, so because there was 4 founders that answered the survey, so we were about to split in 2 and basically go through some of the, so basically this table, right? So look at value creation, amplification, and value sharing together, and the kind of the capital asset, the 5 capital asset mentioned by Sachu-san. And then we had another slide to go through the circular value chain of your own project. Yeah, giving the fact that we have 10 minutes left, yeah, I'm open to suggestion.
Yeah, our project is not here. We are Wells Next Gen. I don't see it here.
Yes. So I saw. Yeah, I guess you did not answer the survey, but also I think AI for zero waste is not in. So I think we could also share it differently. So what I would maybe propose is that we could take one example, start to look at in 10 minutes we have. We can start to look at the work document we prepared, and offline you could then look at this document and work on it yourself, and we could give you a feedback offline after this session. You know, if you have time to actually look at it and start to go through the framework, you can send us a mail and we will provide some feedbacks. Does it seem okay?
Is this a one-part workshop, or maybe Julian, you mentioned like having some of the follow-ups in the beginning of the call. So can we have a follow-up, half an hour, just to?
Yeah, I think we can organize that, of course. So let me show you first, you know, what we had in mind. Okay, so
add something here, Julian. I mean, most welcome, whatever you guys want. But it's just 10 minutes left. If you want to continue explaining what you've kind of left as slides, you could do that. And maybe the next week, do only workshop. Just a suggestion, up to you. But if you would want, we can also kind of do that and maybe ensure that more people are joining in. They have seen the recording. If at all it feels like something that you would like to do.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we'll need to discuss in the team, you know, about availabilities and stuff. And actually, it was quite good that we had 4 answers. So then we could really have dedicated kind of coaching. So it depends, you know, how many people would join a workshop next week. Let us discuss offline with as I said, it was the first time. So, you know, in terms of tuning the duration of the presentation and the workshop, but yeah, we spent a little bit too long on the presentation. But yeah, I think this is something we could consider for sure.
I think it's best if we go more in detail with the example and do a workshop I don't know if next week, but follow-up workshop for the people who really want to do it. Maybe it's worth spending more time on their case, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Agree.
We could even work, actually, I had this question, sorry, I know we have to finish, but I had this question, like a DT mentor and general business strategy mentor. Why don't we have a ESG or SDG mentor? So I think we can see them here. Thank you, all of you. So we can actually work offline based on this canvas and then come prepared for the next time's workshop. Then we can just discuss the results.
Yes.
I'm happy to connect with Juanita and of course Julian, you separately and work on this for Bloom, and we present it in the next.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah, so let's organize a follow-up session. I mean, as mentioned, it was the first cohort with this impact aspect. So with DeepT, we use the lean strategy approach, like step by step. So this first one, there was not the idea of a full kind of mentor, coach, etc. Also because, I'm not sure we'll be able to find mentors for all the 19 projects, but I think the idea is based on this session and the next one, we'll have feedback from you guys, and the team from Lisa, and update the approach for cohort 5. Yeah. If it makes
also,
sense.
Julian, sorry, you mentioned the survey. I wasn't aware of it. Clearly missed it. I hope I'm not the only founder who missed it.
Anjan, the survey was sent out email at least 3 times. 3 emails the survey has gone out. So if you've been checking the Lisa emails, it should be in definitely.
About survey in general?
Yeah, this was sent out in the emails, Lisa emails. And to your question, Abhi, absolutely. The idea was to see what is, if people like it and, what kind of things they are asking for. And the idea was that we'll try it in this cohort and then build upon it. So idea well taken.
Yeah. Okay, so then some example. So we had one example. We had a session with this small startup company from the UK, which is called Ox. So what is this company doing? So you can see the address here. So they are providing logistic as a service to development countries, especially Africa, and their first market is Rwanda. To do that, they have basically developed a dedicated vehicle, which is the one you see in the picture. And this vehicle is an electric vehicle, okay? And so what is interesting as well, so this vehicle is very cheap, but very rugged, so, well suited to the target market. And you can guess that in Africa, in this kind of rural area, there are not so many kind of charging points, and the infrastructure might not be fully suited to an EV vehicle. So what they also do is they partner with solar panel kind of energy provider companies, so that when they target an area, they will build a depot for Ox, and next to it, they will build with this partner like a solar field to basically supply energy to the trucks, but also start the solar infrastructure for the region. So the value creation, the basic is, this is a logistic as a service company, and they provide transportation of goods to individual customers. Okay, so they make benefits on this service. They have created as a value, this vehicle, but currently they do not sell it. It's just for their own use, and they target emerging markets. So we talk about amplification, before. What is amplification? And this is where we see this is a good example, because what they will target is very rural area where basically most of the farmers, they don't have a vehicle, they don't have trucks from their own. And if they need a truck, for example, to bring their product to the next city, to the market, they will rent and they will ask the service to a truckman around, which usually is pretty expensive, not really reliable, and the price are fluctuating a lot. So what this enables, this Ox service enables, is to have very stable price for this logistic service, and it will enable small business to reach bigger cities, because basically they will be able, instead of using their kind of horse or going by foot or bicycle, they would go a bit further to bigger cities and have a bigger target audience and market. It will increase their transaction volumes, increase their turnover, and year on year they can grow as a business. The second aspect is that it developed the green energy green electricity in this target country. Okay, so actually the overall impact in terms of environment could take into account this kind of creation of green electricity in the target market. And also they started to develop micro funding, training and marketing services for this small business. Okay, again, helping the small business to grow. And they have very clearly stated this kind of virtual circle, as you can see on the top right, where they provide clean, affordable transports. They help a business to access new markets, increase income, give new business opportunities and opportunities for OX services. So for example, the financing and trading. And the value sharing is basically providing this low cost, reliable transports in challenging environments. This overall reduce the price of goods and share the value created with the business owners, but also the final customers. And the impact here, if they look at the SDGs, they will clearly have an environmental impact because they replace kind of old trucks with diesel, big emissions and pollution by electric vehicles. They support installation of clean energy, and the truck itself is low emission in the manufacturing and the transport this truck from the factory to the target market. And then the second aspect is clearly social because they target small business in challenging environments and help them to develop and improve then the livelihood of the area. So they will clearly kind of be able to claim impact on both. On the value chain, so when they thought about this, so the battery, as you know, is a high impact element on the environment. So what they do is once the battery is fully used on the vehicle, it can be reconditioned and used as stationary energy storage, which is very well suited to the solar panel energy partnership they have and this local area. So when there is usually this kind of green energy will need some storage to cover for a period where, night, for example, or when there is the solar energy is quite low. And they have also thought about recycling of the key material of the battery. And on the truck itself, it's been designed with, very simple design, like a lot of the elements are flat elements, easily to replace. So they have kind of thought from the start about the right to repair in the design, and most of the parts are sold separately and easy to repair and to replace, similar to the Fairphone, for example, so that it can be very sustainable and robust in this kind of Rwanda, Africa environment. Okay, so this is an example that we choose, and you could have similar kind of thoughts. We did not go up to the point of measuring impact, etc., but this is to show you, some of the ideas that we shared to you apply to a project. Okay, so this is the end of the time. Deepti, do you want to have maybe like a closing comments before we move to the potential next session?
Sure. I mean, for me, I just want to thank you guys. I think it was so informative, even for me, for myself, even though I know a bit about it, but yeah, it was very informative. And I think that from what I see from Abhi, Amy, and Anju, that it seems like, people are really liking what the concepts they're taking away. Definitely worth it to take it to the next level in terms of workshop. Maybe we can think about it also in the next times, that maybe one session is only information and the second session is workshops, so people are more prepared about how to think about it. And what I really see here is, one is of course impact and the measurement that we were all talking about, but how beautifully this can be done, converted into narrative building and a USP that you're looking for when you're creating your pitch decks, which is again something which is very important, right? So I'm just thinking if we can, in the next workshop, just take the idea away. It's up to you guys if you want to do it or not, but how they can build this kind of framework into some sort of storytelling for the USP that they can actually carve out of the workshop and the session. So it is much more than just impact measurement, but creating a bigger value, and which would be more usable at this stage for them when they're going and pitching, where sometimes investors may care for impact and sometimes they may not, but either ways it's going to be helpful. So that's something that I would just say. But thank you so much. You guys have put in so much effort, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That
Very
was
much.
super
Very helpful.
Thank you. So I would like to thank also the other Impact by Lead team, because thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to prepare, and I think Deepti, the attendance was limited number of people, but what we think is actually if there is one or two founders that actually then make real impact because of this first session, it's a target fully achieved.
That's great.